space is your space. It's a space for the left to discuss, to debate.
Let's challenge the inequality, challenge the injustice, challenge the prejudice, unite people together in a clear vision of the kind of society we can live in this country and the kind of contribution we can make to the wider world.
When a working class mum on an estate asks, who's going to stand up for me? When 3 million EU migrants who are workers, who are trade union members, many of them, stand up and say, who are our friends among the British people? When the young ask, who's going to pay our college fees? When couples in their 20s say, who's going to give us the right to an affordable rent, a secure tenancy? Rights at work, access to justice when the rights are floated. When people survey their town centre, blighted by closed shops, poverty, bleakness, crime, dislocation, and they said, who in the world could put this right? We have an answer. And you heard the man who has the answer. It is us, the Labour Party. We are the hand around your shoulder. We, like you, are pissed off, tired, damaged, and yes, afraid of what's coming in the future. But there's 500,000 of us, and if we stick together, we can win.
GMB is on the way to creating a 21st century union, and yes, we embrace technology. We're ready for the fourth industrial revolution, but we will stand firm against exploitative business models where workers meet the costs and shareholders laugh all the way to the bank.
And it was James Baldwin who said, those who say that it cannot be done are usually interrupted by others doing it. So we've got a lot of interrupting to do. Thank you.
I think one of the most important set of issues that we face today is that the people who own the economy, the people who decide about investment decisions, relating to the economy, they control the future.
And the government is trying to silence the trade union movement through the Trade Union Act, which takes out the ability for us to take industrial action. So yes, if you're not angry, you're just not paying attention, and I think that's the issue that we've got. And it is really important that we have a strategy. It is really important that we have a cohesive movement.
You can call it the Oxford University Grammar Academy Specialist School. I don't care. I don't care what you call the thing. You have the same sites. Educational reform has always used exactly the same sites and buildings as we change things. You do it slowly because teachers have had enough reforms that are fast, but you move towards cooperation, the sharing of resources and buildings between sites. And as you do that, you get rid of selection by house price, because what's the point of spending £200,000 more to live in one area if children from an area that's cheaper can move towards your sites, and if you're not going to get the older and more experienced teachers?
We need to shrink the size of the UK finance sector and reduce our economic reliance on it. But that, again, needs to happen in a managed way, not through Brexit, a sudden loss of passporting and a sudden capital flight of all the banks. Banks, as well as creating jobs for bankers on £1 million or whatever a year, there's still cleaners, secretaries, other workers. We get a lot of tax from it. And this idea that, okay, that's great, now that's just solving one aspect of our problem, again, is highly irresponsible. And I think that's coming from some parts of the progressive movement, and we need to be really keep an eye on that as well.
What are the key areas where we should be focusing on this as the left for the next year in terms of negotiating a Brexit deal that works for everyday people?
Yeah, I think from our point of view and for everyday people, we need to be clear about our priorities. And I think for the Labour Party, the priorities have to be the economy and jobs. And it's frankly astonishing that the Prime Minister is putting immigration as our number one priority, immigration control, and she's essentially saying the economy must take whatever the consequences are of this ranking of priorities. Now, I'm not going to sit and pretend that immigration isn't an issue. I'm not going to pretend it didn't play a large part in the referendum. But for a Prime Minister of this country to put immigration control above the economy when negotiating the future, I think is absolutely the wrong approach.
We are dealing here with a single market, not a free market. In that single market, we pursued an employment agenda which was the most progressive agenda created on the left, an environmental agenda created on the left. which underpinned, as Keir said, an economic agenda of prosperity which affected the people we represent.
Our research at Greenwich, as well as other research and very credible research institutions, such as National Institute of Economics and Social Research, show that migration has not been the cause of rising inequality in this country. The impact of migration on even the low-educated, relatively lower-skilled native British workers is negligible, if any.
But trade should be not just about turning everything in our society into a commodity in this gigantic marketplace, but actually creating better standards, better jobs, creating better public services.
The most powerful way to communicate, and I think good news for those of us that care about workers' rights, is to talk about, in the case of Uber, driver treatment. So talk about that many Uber drivers actually don't earn minimum wage if they're leasing a car from Uber, or sort of after you take into account the full cost of working for Uber. Talk about the fact that you don't get sick or holiday pay if you're an Uber driver. Talk about the fact that Uber floods the market with so many drivers that it's something that seems like quite a good gig at the beginning, suddenly over time you're earning less and less money. And then the third thing is to talk about tax dodging, which again I think is something we can be really proud of about as progressives. If you tell people that Uber is a tax dodger, and believe me, Uber is a tax dodger, there's some estimates that say the average black cab driver pays more UK tax than Uber does. That automatically makes people feel a bit annoyed at them.
I think it's really important not to fall into the trap of saying that it's the white working class who are the only residue of racism left in British society, and that it's only amongst sort of UKIP Labour left behinds. That's a terrible narrative. A, it's not true, and B, it's totally disastrous for trying to find a way forward. And I think one of the key rebuttals here is it's not the white working class who are denying black people jobs. If you have to send in 2 times as many CVs to get an interview, is it people who are unemployed on council estates in the north of England who are doing that? Or is it bankers in the city who are looking at your CV and saying, actually, your surname looks a bit funny?
And Sisters Uncut was actually given an apology and told that if it were not for this campaign, Hackney would have not found that they have an institutional problem in taking into account medical evidence when making decisions about people's housing, and they've uncovered that as a wide institutional problem, and that's due to the campaign.
The people of this country are fair-minded, tolerant, open, decent, internationalist, solidaristic. That's who they are. They're not people who want to make common cause with the mobsters in the right-wing press and UKIP. That is the opportunity for us now. Thank you very much.
So we need a different approach. And I believe it is time to change the language around this issue and move away from the talk of freedom of movement on the one hand or border controls on the other, and instead speak of safeguards. Safeguards for communities, safeguards for workers, and safeguards for industries needing labour. At the core of this must be the reassertion of collective bargaining and trade union strength.
And I believe that we all have the power to shape the future, and questioning the way things are is key to changing things.
So finally, this is a time, as I've said, of great crisis, of emergency. But we all have a responsibility. We turn up to conferences like this, not to pat ourselves on the back and you can go to the pub, I'm not banning that, but I'm just saying we're not doing it as a big lefty day out. We're doing this because we understand the enormity of what we're up against. And it will not be easy. You know, they call it a struggle for a reason. They don't call it a walkover. But each and every one of us in the coming generation will be asked, what did we do at a time of such crisis? And we better have a good answer. So let's have the same determination, resilience and courage of our ancestors, and let it be written in the future that Britain was plunged into crisis, but we all did something to build a just, equal, fair society that all of us are driven to fight for. Thank you.